As soon as Hirsch and Spitzer's Witness in the Archive mention art, the former art history and fine art student in me really clung on to that, so I hope you allow me to lean on that for this analysis.
See, the rain is nice, but gee, I don't really like getting wet. What in the world? No, I went under the awning. It's still raining. Why is it still raining? I did what I was supposed to. That's not fair.
This short animation, created by Jack Stauber, evokes so much emotion in such little time. He did what he was supposed to do. He did what he was told and knew would keep him from the rain, yet it couldn't protect him. He still got rained on. This is exactly where we begin with Hirsch and Spitzer's article. We are presented with the case of the Eichmann trials, a man who claims innocence as he was just following orders as a bureaucrat, a middleman manager of the Nazi regime. Author, historian, and philosopher Hannah Arendt, a German-American, writes the book Eichmann Trials in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil. Within these arguments, Arendt found witness testimonies to be distracting. In an evolving and emotional field, as we've seen through scholars like Bell and Malouf, this stance evokes near disbelief. How could a historian, and a philosopher at that, believe that hearing directly from witnesses to be distracting, a term synonymous for unneeded, in a way, or unwanted? Arendt continues to argue that the ideal witness is one who can wrap their lived experiences, lost loved ones, and lost identity in a succinct package of 10 minutes aiming for simplicity. The man in the rain. This is what Arendt imposes on these witnesses. After sharing their stories, they are met with criticism, that it was not enough and that the way they testified was wrong. They stood under the awning, they told their piece, they did what they were asked of them, yet it's still raining. Not everyone felt this way. The prosecutors and commentators saw the picture these witnesses painted and heard the collective voices they spoke for. As the article states, it is Arndt's very discomfort with witness testimonies and the contradictions it reveals that they attempt to highlight. We begin this article being told about the changing of vocabulary to collective memory, and we've seen this before. Bell changed the vocabulary for us to introduce the mythscape. This new piece of vocabulary introduced was actually witness testimony. The article states that witness testimony locates the possibility of grasping the Holocaust in the slippage between law and art. They propose that this shift is a necessary one, as we navigate the differences and relationships between articulating, listening, and truth in these testimonies and in our reception of them. At one point, they quote Annette Wiejorka, who coins testimony had a status of an archival document, and this speaks volume to our perception of history and specifically Holocaust studies. As we document these testimonies and we collect evidence of events, we try to piece everything together to build a bigger picture. Lost in this process, however, is the reality of those giving the testimonies. They are left behind as a transcript, as an event of the past, yet we neglect the person sitting in front of the interviewer. They are not history, they are the present. This cannot be merely a historical event, as those who lived this continue to forge new histories and live and make more memories. Their pain and grief continue as a new chapter of these histories, or should I say, memories. Wiejorka claims that the witness becomes the bearer of history and the need for memory to supplement history. This means that the function of testimony is now not to inform factually, but to transmit it effectively. Ivan Kramskoy's 1884 painting, Inconsolable Grief, portrays this. What we see here is a widow, but what we also see is the bags under her eyes, her avoidance of eye contact, her blank stare, clearly coping with her current reality, the rag to her mouth as she shields herself from our gaze. We don't know her, and she is unable to tell us about who she is and what she's just faced, but we, as the viewer 140 years later, understand. We empathize with her, and there's no need for dialogue. In just this still image of a woman, Kramskoy captures more than any words could tell us. Through Friedlander, we come to understand that the Holocaust, in some ways, and as argued in the article, is an event without witnesses. It is this point which those who serve as witnesses battle. They are, as Laub insists, a witness to oneself, a feeling central to the Holocaust experience. I don't wish to impose how witnesses of these events should feel, but but I cannot help myself but to put myself in their shoes. I can imagine their internal dialogue, whether it be closer to the events or many years later, being along the lines of, why am I the one here today? Why wasn't I there with my family and friends who were stuck? Why am I the voice of this, to speak for millions of others who cannot? I cannot imagine the weight they must carry, and I want to recognize that their identity and identification in this should not be forced upon them, but instead a decision. When knowledge comes, memory comes. Through Friedlander's retelling of his life through the Holocaust and his lack of interaction with it in some ways at the time, showcase how memory comes to be learnt. We learn about his absence of Jewish identity and his removal from the events. Yet, does this dismiss his voice? Friedlander writes, "The letters are here and 2 or 3 yellowed photographs. But for the others, the traces will soon no longer mean anything. I must write then. Writing retraces the contours of the past with a possibly less ephemeral stroke than others. It does at least preserve a presence, and it enables one to tell about a child who saw one world founder and another reborn." Maloof speaks to the swelling of identities, but I propose more emphasis here on the shrinking of identities. Friedlander finds himself as simply a boy, arguably German and then Jewish and then a devoted Catholic. After learning about what Auschwitz was, and that his parents had died, he forms a new identity. This new identity is one filled with anger and sorrow. He doesn't know what to grasp onto anymore. This is one of the most emotional parts of the story for me, not because his parents' death, but because what that meant for a child who had nothing to hold on to. He writes this memoir, and in it, along with the readers, rediscovers his identities, their shifts, and acknowledges how that is meant to change. He writes and recalls to learn about himself and to uncover memories and identities of the past that can sometimes not be understood without taking a step back. To really capture what it means to simply listen, I want to mention Marina Abramovic, a performance artist who sat at the Metropolitan Museum of Art across from strangers for as long as they needed. She sat there for 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, in a performance lasting almost 3 months. They did not speak, and they did not move, they simply looked. Collected were images of the participants and their reactions to simply being seen and being silently heard. When I think about these strangers who just decided to go to the MoMA one day, I think about Friedlander and his belief that you can learn from your memories in order to access their depth. I believe for a lot of these people this happened during the experience. We can see that many are brought to tears, but we will never know what conjured this, or what they were thinking, or what it meant to simply be seen. But I don't think we need to. I don't think we have to have all the facts in order to understand, and I see this pairing very well with the article I'm presenting today. If you'll entertain my connection for just a little longer, Abramovic's partner, who she hadn't seen in 33 years, came to sit with her without her knowing. In the same vein of how Friedlander is reflecting, and how those who served as witness testimonies in the trials that were called to reflect, we see Abramovic and Ule face one another in real time and get to see their processing, their understanding, the joy but also pain, and what this meant to them. This article provided some optimism for my typically pessimistic perspective. How are we to even begin considering Habermas's idea of a world society if we cannot even listen to the silences of those in pain? Though incomparable to the events discussed thus far, I resonate with the intentions of this article. As someone who has unfortunately been faced with an immense amount of grief in my short life so far, silence is sometimes what you hope to hear, or what you wish you'd heard. Then nothing is wrong. Then you remain unaware. But it's quite poetic, actually, to consider that on the other hand, silence sometimes speaks the most, and it can tell us what we don't want to face or hear, without the loudness or facts of realities allowing us to understand at our own pace. There is beauty in simply humans perceiving, understanding, and recognizing one another. Thank you.